Boom, here we are. Okay, how Google earned 160 billion in 2019. Yeah, through online advertising. Okay, so big picture stuff we're going to talk about today: advertising, Google, and search engine optimization. So Google has two main revenue models, AdWords and AdSense. We'll talk about both of them, and then we'll compare online advertising to traditional advertising. So what do Google's advertisers want? Well, they want their website to bring in more money, right? And this can happen in a few different ways. Number one, immediate payoff. So somebody sees an ad, they show up at the site, they buy something. That's great. Future returns, it's a little bit more difficult to assess, right? If somebody visits the website, they look at a product, they don't buy it right away, but maybe they come back in a week or a month and buy it. And you can have indicators for that for things like doing deeper product research, like looking at the page in more depth, or returning repeatedly to visit the page, or signing up to receive email notifications. All those are good future signals that the person might come around and buy the thing later on. Last one, future returns not through the website. This is very difficult to assess. So information used to buy things at physical stores, right? For example, somebody visits bestbuy.com, researches a product, and then later on goes on to buy the product at a Best Buy store. I know that's not the standard business model. The standard way to use Best Buy these days is, of course, to view the product in a Best Buy store and then go buy it online for cheaper somewhere else. But this absolutely can happen. People view products in physical stores and then buy it through the website later. Now, everything on the website should support long-term goals, right? The business wants to make more money and improve its competitive standing. That's what the advertisers want. Apparently, my daughter's having a big meltdown downstairs for some reason. All right, that happens. Anyway, if you have a legitimate business, you should want a good website. You want a good website that's easy to navigate, easy to search, has short paths to popular products, the pages load fast. All of those are attributes that a credible retail website wants. And to a distant point, you also want site traffic. All site traffic has some non-zero value, always has some possibility of buying a product, but getting more customers to your site is generally going to require more aggressive advertising, meaning you're going to have continually lower returns on each advertising dollar. So Google helps with this, helps generate revenue by helping customers find your site and content. Sorry, it's a little bit distracting what's going on down there. I'm going to pause this for 1 second. Okay, so Google helps these sites get traffic in various ways. They can run advertisements through Google's platform and make a reasonable guess about how valuable that traffic is. Yeah. Okay. So what does Google want, right? So the advertisers want to make more money and they want to get information in particular about what ads are working and how well they're working, that sort of thing. What does Google want? Well, number one, Google figures search should be free and reasonably well linked to what users want to find. So the search capability should be something that you don't pay for because, I mean, sure, Google would like customers to pay for it, but nobody's going to pay for it, right? It's a free service. How do you piggyback some sort of revenue generating activity on top of that free service? Within search, bogus or dangerous sites should be avoided. So Google will generally put in some kind of warning alongside some kind of site. You know, this site is known to be bad and blah, blah, blah. Don't go there. And last, for legitimate sites, Google allows paying to elevate this, the rankings of ads shown with a set of terms. Okay, so you're not going to actually elevate the quality of the ranking of the search results proper, right? What you will elevate is where ads are shown in relation to the set of search results. So the question for businesses is, which terms are worth paying to have your ads shown along with? For example, if you are a business that sells shoes, you might think, well, I'll have my ads run alongside the word shoes. But guess what? Everybody else who's selling shoes at all, even if their business is entirely about shoes or only a small part of their business, they would be willing to bid a little bit on the term shoes. So they have to figure out how much is this particular set of terms, what's a good bid for that? And the questions you might answer in that vein are, number one, does search lead to actual visits? So if search is already leading to visits, why pay extra for ads? Or why pay a lot extra anyway? If you're already ranking really high at the top of the ordinary search results, maybe you don't need to do much in terms of advertising on top of that. But number two, do visits lead to purchases? Well, that's another thing. So for example, if your ordinary search result clicks do lead to a lot of visits but very few purchases, but you find out that if you show ads for particular products and a lot of people who click on those ads do go to a customized landing page and then do end up being much more likely to buy something, it could actually be worth it to advertise even though your site is ranking high in regular search. Okay, and last, again, just the comparison of the two, comparison against organic search. Are ads better than unpaid search? Okay. So Google's search engine results. So originally it was based on site content and structure. Google had something called the PageRank algorithm, which essentially was designed around, number one, finding exact term matches, and then looked at things like how many links went to that page. So the idea fundamentally with PageRank, for those of you who don't know, okay, PageRank was designed to essentially correspond to a random walk over the internet. Basically, a large site with many pages was more likely to be stumbled upon by a random user. And likewise, pages that were more often linked to by others were also more likely to be visited. Okay, so that was the key idea of PageRank. And again, the consequence, number one, consequences. Number one, worked pretty well in the 90s. But by the early 2000s, Google results were starting to be full of spam, right? Basically, junky sites that didn't have real content, but just lots of ads, and desperately hoped that visitors would click on one, okay? So, consequence of this, right, because of all these junky spam pages, Google became less effective. Users had to scroll through more results to actually find what they wanted. Okay, so this is a problem. And the end result, Google developed better models for search result ranking, right? Basically, PageRank still exists, but is only a small part of the algorithm now. Okay, and last, better techniques for filtering out the garbagey sites. Okay, so that's where we are now. So PageRank, once upon a time, that was Google's model. I should add one last thing. And number 5, some inexactness in search terms is permitted, right? Once upon a time, the search terms had to be basically exact matches. Maybe you could allow it with an S attached, and that was about it. But nowadays, of course, in order to get better results for people, Google's allowing more flexibility in search terms, for example, misspellings or alternate phrasings that have the same meaning, things like that. So it's a much more advanced model than the early PageRank. So again, these days, search engine ranking systems, closely guarded secrets. They include both on-site and off-site factors. So they'll look at what people do while they're on your site, how quickly they bounce away afterwards. For example, if it's a garbagey site, almost all customers will pretty much immediately bounce away from it. Whereas if it's a decent site and that site is running Google Analytics, Google has a lot of information about what customers do on that site. These more advanced techniques, more complicated algorithms, they're designed to discourage manipulation. So in the old PageRank system, you could just develop a large junky site that had a lot of search terms packed into it, and then build that up as part of a network of other sites that were all cross-linked to each other. And then you could fool Google into thinking, this is a high quality site as far as PageRank can tell. So it's much harder to manipulate now. It's not saying you can't do it. You can still find some of these junky pages out there, but it's a lot tougher. Also, Google's search result quality is not easily replicated by competitors because they have so much data and their models are more sophisticated and they have the capability to crunch the numbers faster. Other operations like Bing, basically they can't keep up. Lately, like within the last 10 years or so, Google has also brought in personalized search results. So depending on what you're doing on your own machine, you'll see somewhat different search results from what another random user would. Okay. So search engine optimization is basically the process of trying to get your site to rank higher in the organic search listings, not ads, but just the regular search listings that can't be bought. So there's two basic categories of that. One is white hat, one is black hat. The terms derive from the old American Westerns, where the good guys would always wear white hats and the bad guys would always wear black hats, and that's how you could tell who was good and who was bad. So anyway, white hat techniques. The basic rules. Number one, your site should look the same to users as it does to search engine spiders, the software agents that go around and scan the web pages. If it looks different, for example, if the user just sees an image, but the spider sees there's this big image with a lot of search terms packed behind it, then they're going to know, you did something shady. You're not maybe such a good site. Anyway, the idea with white hat techniques is you'll get ranked highly for relevant search terms as a natural consequence of having an appropriate site for them. So, typical examples. Whatever service you're selling, it should match your page title. For example, if you're operating a dental service near UIC, right, you would say dental services near UIC, and you could be more specific. It could be like orthodontics, and you could list that as the page title. Other things, the text matches the site and the page purpose, right? It's not jumbled up with a bunch of random search terms designed to bring people in, but you have some reasonably grammatically correct text with a lot of a lot of semantic interrelationships with it all. For example, if your page is about orthodontics, you'll have other related terms like dentistry and, I don't know, teeth, whatever, x-rays, braces, all that kind of stuff that they do. So the things that are on the site will appear to be logically coherent, right? It won't be something like orthodontics and then the other thing is going to be like a list of popular movies from the last couple of years. It doesn't make sense. And the last thing, up-to-date links, just generally having the site be online and available all the time, having the links still active. Because if you're a reputable commercial site, you want your links to be active. You want your customers to be able to use the site to get to what they need so you can sell them services. Junky sites, on the other hand, they tend to have a lot of these links fail because networks of junky sites are continually getting shut down and restarted, and so the links don't always get updated quickly. But Google can recognize, you know what? You're a site that doesn't update its links frequently and the text doesn't really correlate. It's all a jumble of search terms. It's a word salad. Yeah, this feels kind of junky. You're not a good site. All right. But the black hat techniques are always a little more interesting. So what are the ways that people try to fool search engines? Well, common example, number one, packing in a bunch of search terms, keywords in non-visible text or portions of the screen. For example, one of the things you used to see is something like this, right? Where the visible part of the screen would be like this, but the actual web page, go out something like that. Okay, so you would see visible and then scroll out to see this, right? Again, lots of search terms, maybe lots of ads. Okay, so the thing that the typical users see if they don't scroll around is going to be very different. So one reason why you would have an area this big is so you can pack it with lots of search terms, or so you can pack it with lots of images and ads to hide the search terms behind them. Okay, links to networks of spam sites. So again, all these junky sites, one way that they got around the page rank limitation is by linking to each other. So you'd have some site designer that has one batch of junky pages and starts cross-linking them to each other within the site and cross-linking them across sites. And suddenly it looks, wow, these junky pages must be really popular because there are so many other sites linking to them. Yeah, but they're all kind of junky. What happens though, one of the ways that Google can detect this is that you'll have a network of sites that is very heavily cross-linked with itself, right? So I can do a, something like this. So these guys are all cross-linked to themselves, but almost entirely not linked to other sites, right? But they're very, very cross-linked to themselves. So one of the things Google does is to compare that. Compare how much the sites make a tightly knit network of garbage. Okay, and Google can detect that now because it tracks lists. Oh, all these sites are linked to all these other sites, and they sort of form a little pocket there that's off by itself, but it's a pocket of garbage. No other sites, really link to them. Or if people do visit them through other sites, they tend to immediately bounce away. Okay, last one, sometimes sites will even generate phony web traffic to make their sites appear popular. That's one of the things that Google checks for, right? If they're looking at a viable commercial site, they're going to expect it to have a certain level of traffic. Well, there are ways to generate that kind of phony traffic through various bots and spiders, things like that. Anyway, so search engines have become a lot more sophisticated and a lot more opaque. They don't reveal their model in order to better identify these spam sites, to make it harder for the spam sites to get any traffic through Google anyway. So number one, this is an example of how Google can leverage its information sources. It has a lot of information about what's out there on the internet, and it can use that information to direct users to the better sites instead of the garbagier ones. Another thing, Google can compare its own local data versus the global market data. So for example, if Google sees that some network of sites doesn't get any traffic through Google, but appears to get a lot of traffic from the rest of the world, Google might think, yeah, that's a little sketchy, that's a little suspicious. Maybe you're not our kind of site. Anyway, if Google figures out that you're using some of these various black hat techniques, your site is probably going to get dropped from the search listings. And occasionally this does even happen with reputable sites. Sometimes, whether intentionally or not, they'll adopt some of these black hat techniques. It can be even something simple like, doing some misformatting of, text behind images. That can occasionally happen. Usually it gets sorted out. But if it's pervasive, even if you're a legitimate commercial operation, yeah, Google's going to pull you from the listings for a while. But there's always this co-evolution going on, just the same as security or anything else. Google can detect one type of problem, but then other kinds of problems, people will find a way to get around it that Google maybe won't detect. All right, so for example, maybe if you're linked to a network of spam sites, yeah, a lot of these spam sites, they tended to drift into the world of clickbait, right? So they were junky, but they weren't totally junky. And they linked to other clickbait sites, but they didn't just link to other clickbait sites. All right, we have a comment. How can you unintentionally adopt a black hat technique? Well, you could miswrite the page, right? So for example, so the question was, how do you unintentionally adopt a black hat technique? So one of the things that's bad, right? Search terms behind images. Okay, so some sites, yeah, they'll put in, a slug of text behind an image. Technically, that is a black hat technique, right? But it could just be there's a misspecification. It could be, for example, somebody put the tag, they have as formatting, show the images up front, But then inside the image, they have this long list of search terms. And instead of putting that tag outside, they put it inside. You're right. In most cases, it is probably intentional, but it is possible, at least, to unintentionally do things like that. You just made a mistake writing up the page. Anyway. Okay, so let's talk about spam blogs a little bit because that's a fun thing. So the essential attributes of spam blogs, these are those junky pages, spam blogs or splogs as they were sometimes called. They don't have any useful content. They have a lot of popular search terms and they draw a fair amount of traffic, but almost no repeat visits. And they tend to have a very high bounce rate. Now, spam blogs typically don't exist just, you know, for no reason, right? They're going to try to run ads in order to generate some kind of revenue. Other ones might be really bad and try to install malware on your machine and get revenue that way. But the more typical thing, yeah, they'll try to run some ads. So typically these pages are packed with ads. They're packed with ads. They don't have any useful content. A lot of users bounce away from them. Google figures, you know what? If we prune these all from the search results, nobody's going to feel too bad about it. So Google regards these spam blogs unfavorably, and if you try to advertise with them through Google, right, through one of Google's platforms, they're going to cancel your account. They're going to say, you know what, you don't really have any content here, you just have a bunch of ads and a bunch of search terms, you're out. The other thing, spam blogs degrade the performance of Google itself. So Google wants to show users a good set of relevant search listings. If some of these spam blog entries show up in the search listings, that's some garbage that isn't helping people out. So again, up until about, I don't know, 15 years ago, this was a very serious problem for Google, but eventually they figured out how to get around it. And now you really have to go through some contortions to try to find any. I mean, there are some of them out there. One of the things you can do is start just entering in a random set of search terms, and you might eventually find some toward the end of the search term listings. But Google uses techniques like visitor reports. So if people say, hey, this is a junky page, then Google will consider that. Google also does automated website content analysis. So things like looking at the relevance between search terms. For example, okay, if you have a listing of, I don't know, for stock prices, right, you would include a list of companies. And for baseball, you would include a list of baseball teams. And it makes sense that, you know, a page that's about baseball would have a bunch of baseball teams, and a page that's about finance might have a bunch of stock ticker symbols. But if you find all of that bundled up together, baseball teams and stock symbols and famous places in the world and famous people and names of movies, then Google's going to look at that and say, yeah, this is, no, doesn't make any sense. It's just a bunch of stuff all mixed together. Anyway, what happened though, a lot of these spam blogs, they did evolve into clickbait pages. They didn't really put together great content, but they put content that was legitimate enough that Google says, yeah, okay, maybe some people will like this stuff. Okay. Do a time check. We got a few minutes. Let's do a few more slides. We'll call it a day. So Google advertising principles, general things. So click-through rate, competitive bidding, quality score, day parting optimization. So the click-through rate is very simply the ratio of ad clicks to views. So if 100 people see an ad, 2 of them click on it, the click-through rate is 2%. Google wants the click-through rate to be high because that's good. It means ad users are finding your ad relevant. They're interested in the product. On the other hand, if the click rate is very low, then it's bad. Users aren't that interested. Now, for targeted web pages, that means you're not going to any real effort to direct your ads to particular sets of customers, right? The click-through rates tend to be far less than 1%, something around the order of 0.1%, and that includes the fact that about half of these clicks are accidental. So unless you're doing a good job targeting your ad to the right customers, for example, through a platform like Google, and you've thought about what keywords to advertise along with, your results are not going to be good. Okay. Competitive bidding model. So when Google runs ads, it wants to sell the ad space to whichever advertiser is likely to pay more. And that includes things like click probability and the cost per click. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at this for a second. How does Google maximize its ad revenue? Well, part one, more clicks, right? But part two, more dollars per click. And the revenue that Google gets, so what we want to maximize is actually clicks times dollars per click, right? That's what's going to do it. So Google is willing to accept a not so great ad, right? One with lower click-through rate in return for some extra dollars per click, because Google wants to maximize the product, right? Google is not that worried about it. So it wouldn't do this with search results. Google wants to show the best search results, period. But for ads, Google will take some money to, show maybe the ad that's not the most relevant for a set of keywords. All right, that's what Google wants to do. So other things, Google's model was initially developed with the idea that search would continue exploding, web traffic would continue exploding. I mean, look at where things are compared to 25 years ago. Web traffic is way up. So Google says, we don't want to set fixed prices. We want to let them float naturally, because as more users join the internet, there'll be more advertisers advertising, and there'll be roughly the same number of search terms. Why? Because the vocabulary doesn't change that much. But if the advertisers all want to bid on a particular set of search terms, guess what? The price per click on all that is going to go up. So they want to set floating rates. Likewise to that, they don't want to get locked in long-term at some sort of suboptimal rate. In order to do this, they basically let advertisers bid against each other. So for any set of search terms, Google says, all you advertisers, you go ahead and bid, and we'll set the minimum bid per click at something like a quarter, and you can bid higher above that. And depending on how many clicks you get and what you're willing to bid, Google's going to determine which ads get shown at the top. Okay, so the way it works, the advertiser sets a maximum daily budget for its AdWords account. Within Google, there's no inherent charge for displaying the ad in the standard pay-per-click model. So Google will show the ad. It tries to pick the best ones, but if Google does show the ad all day and nobody clicks on it, the advertiser doesn't have to pay anything. Typically, the advertiser is going to pay Google whenever a viewer clicks on the ad. So consequences of this model, number one, advertisers see that there's not that much risk. So it encourages participation, which tend to drive up ads for Google, because more advertisers think, I don't have that much to lose. I only have to pay anything if somebody clicks on the ad and comes to my site, which is really what I want. Then, yeah, more advertisers are going to join, and overall that's going to push up the ad rates. Problem for Google, though, they have to rank the ads to maximize revenue, right? They have to come up with some system for doing this. Well, the way Google does this is what's called the quality score. So the quality score, the big picture, Google wants to rank the ads according to how much revenue they're going to generate over time. So the quality score encapsulates that whole goodness thing. For everything from showing the ad to the actual purchase after seeing it. So there's going to be some baseline relevance in place. Google is going to say, how relevant is this ad for this set of search terms? For example, if it's an ad for shoes, it's going to be very relevant to the search term shoes. If it's an ad for spaghetti, not going to be so relevant. So Google tries to assess that base relevance in the first place. Then, as a modifier, Google applies the click-through rate. So some ads, right, have the same exact search terms selling the same kind of product. Some ads are going to get clicked more than others. Google's going to track that. And then Google's going to assess the site quality. If the site is running Google Analytics, for example, or other publicly available, Google can also look at publicly accessible parts of the site. Google is going to assess that. How well is it set up? How easy is it to navigate? When it has the information, what's the goal conversion rate for sales? All those factors Google is going to use to say, this is a good site or a not so good site. So piling all those together, Google's going to figure that a relevant ad that has a good click-through rate and is attached to a good site is going to have a pretty high quality score. That's the kind of ad that Google wants to show. So those higher quality ads means they're going to get the better location on pages. So Google's going to show them at the top of the first page of search results, for example, as opposed to on the bottom of the fourth page of search results. And any ad that has a good quality score is going to get charged less to try to improve its ad location. So if your ad already has a good quality score, but you want to bid it up higher because maybe there's some worse ads that are already bidding a lot, Google's not going to charge you as much to get up there because it's basically going to be a multiplier on it. If your ad is already pretty good, then just paying a little bit of money on top of that would still be a winning proposition for Google. Anyway, big picture, when Google wants the advertisers to be happy, because when the ads are making money, then the advertisers stay with Google and Google keeps on making money. Life is good. Okay, last thing, day parting optimization. So there are a lot of kinds of ads that get a high response rate at predictable cycles, either times of day, days of the week, whatever. So for example, if you're a business to business ad, well, most businesses are up and working during the daytime. So those kind of ads typically are best during daytime working hours. Most online shopping typically happens in the early evening, right? Or maybe not most, but you know, the biggest chunk of it does. So you might want to prioritize your ad for that to appear in the early evening. Weekends might be a popular time for dining out. So if you're thinking of doing some ad, movies, restaurants, fun weekend activities, might make more sense to advertise those on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as opposed to on Sunday night or Monday morning when people maybe aren't thinking about that. Anyway, day parting is a way that the advertisers can customize the times where their ads will appear more or less often. Excuse me. And doing that correctly improves the quality score and again allows lower bids for a given advertising option. So by having your ad only appear at times when it's more likely to get clicked on, that means your quality score is going to go up because your effective click rate for the times when your ad is visible is going to be higher. And then if you want to improve the standing of your ad by bidding on top of that, then it's going to cost you less to bump up your ad's position. Okay. So again, key thing, we'll talk about this and then we'll call it a day. I know we went a couple minutes over. We'll return to AdWords and AdSense to Google platforms on Wednesday. So Google allows advertising, okay? Multiple models for that. Every ad has an assessed quality score, okay? Basically, how good the ad is. There's also a bidding mechanism, okay? And the ad's position is determined by the combination of quality score and bid, okay? So these two things are separate. So an advertiser with a cruddy ad, with a terrible ad, could bid it up to the top position on a set of search terms, but it would be very expensive. But they could do it, is the point, right? The point is that bidding and the quality score are separate. Likewise, an ad with a great quality score might appear at the top, even though the advertiser made a very low bid per click, right? Basically what the advertiser is willing to pay per click. So these two things are separate. Quality score and bid price per click are separate. Okay. So this is a good break point. We'll come back, we'll talk about AdWords and AdSense on Wednesday. I'm going to stop the recording.